So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third keynote of the day. And this time I am so pleased and honored to welcome Dr. Tony Dale to our conference this afternoon. And just a little bit about Dr. Dale to start. He is the founder and chairman of the Caris Group as well as Sedera. And in both, as part of those roles, he's directly impacted the lives of millions of patients who have sought the best possible care at fair and affordable prices. Dr. Dale also just wrote a book. It's called The Cure for Healthcare. And that's going to be published in the summer of 2021, which is now. It's available for pre-order on Amazon. So with that, Dr. Dale, take it away.
Well, Stacy, thank you so much. I really appreciate your kind remarks. I'm going to share my screen so that everybody can see. Daryl Moon from Orion, reached out to me and asked me if I was willing to share. The automatic response was yes, because there are so many challenges on the journey to becoming truly aspirational. Now, many of you are going to have heard a lot about the NUCA system of care over the last 24, 48 hours. And I so admire what Dr. Eby and all of the team have done there in Alaska. It's just an inspiration. But of course, it's one thing to be inspired as we look at a distance at what someone else does. But I think the real challenge of a conference like this is all of us are called to really live up to the capacity that there is within us. And so that's why I asked for this as a first slide to put out there, without a vision, people perish. A famous quote from King Solomon of old. But, into that context, it's very true that the healthcare world is one where if we're going to really see things change in the way that we all aspire to, we need to have a vision. And we're going to talk a little bit about that vision. I want to share a little bit of my own journey and what has led me into being an entrepreneur. I may be a family doctor by background, but I guess hidden within me were aspirations that went maybe deeper and would involve over time touching way more people. And one of those things recently that I read that so impacted me was this quote. We would love to think that we have healthcare that incidentally involves some wealth transfer. What we actually have is wealth transfer that incidentally involves some healthcare. Now, this isn't someone who's an expert in the healthcare system. It's a historian writing in a book describing his own experience of the healthcare system. And what a tragedy that what, many of us consider the most remarkable healthcare system in the world. Certainly, so many Nobel Prizes and all sorts of innovation and creative thinking that goes on could have someone experiencing it level this sort of accusation at it. I think we all know the reality of what I put up here. We know we need access to healthcare, but somehow things have got really confused. And, whether one's looking at the Affordable Care Act, whether one's looking at, alternate sort of approaches, so much of the conversation about health care has instead been focused on health insurance. And I think we need to start out by understanding health insurance is just one way to pay for health care, that having coverage doesn't automatically equal care. I'm British by background, American by choice and by nationality now. But back in my British days when I trained under the National Health Service and worked as a family doctor, I saw the reality. Everybody in the country had coverage, but that didn't mean they had access. It certainly didn't mean they had care. And so, it raises all sorts of questions in terms of how can we give people the healthcare that they quite legitimately aspire to? And so I'm going to suggest that actually we need to expand our thinking, and we need to expand it dramatically. This slide is just trying to illustrate a concept. If we look at the sharing economy, it's had an incredible impact on transportation over the last 10 or 15 years. I mean, back just 15 years ago, there were basically, you had your own car or maybe buses or taxis, but that's how you got around town. Well, that's all changed. Two software engineers who get trapped in Paris find themselves late at night after a meeting, standing in a rainstorm, trying to flag down a taxi, but no taxi stops. They're all already full. And they're thinking, there has to be a better way. And I guess they get back home and they continue their conversations and they think about it. And what comes out of it is Uber. Now, Uber at its heart is just a technological solution to a problem that we didn't even know that we had. We thought we had transport when we needed it, but actually so much of the time it doesn't work out quite like that. And in a remarkable way, that sort of ideas expressed by Uber or Lyft or Bird or, any of these other entities that have emerged in a very short time have taken a massive area and through the power of technology and of human ingenuity, have helped us come to have far more solutions available. And I want to suggest that actually the same thing is happening in healthcare, even though people may not realize it. A lot of this is happening sort of under the surface where people may not see it. If you looked back 15 or 20 years, of course, we were familiar with hospitals. We were familiar, with our doctor friend down here with his mask and scrubs and the nurse. Maybe some of us who are, involved in the conference today were aware of things like the Christian Healthcare Sharing Ministries. They were relatively small nationwide. They only represented maybe couple of 100,000 people. I don't know. So there were little sort of innovations happening. But basically, the system had been the same for a century or more. And now suddenly there's been a flowering of innovation. I mean, I just picked out certain names here, green imaging. I love, it's a radiologist, an imaging specialist who began thinking around about 2010, Priceline has shown what can be done with surplus capacity in the airline industry or maybe in the hotel industry. I wonder what could be done with surplus capacity in the imaging world. And what's grown out of that is something like 1,400 locations in 40 plus states where people are getting transparent pricing on imaging, where, instead of having to pay $3,500 for an MRI, which is roughly what MRIs here in Austin cost if you go to either of the two major hospital systems, you can get a cash price for an MRI of $350. Just by someone having the imagination to come up with a great concept of how we can harness that surplus capacity. Or if you look at, what the insurance brokers are doing through groups like Health Rosetta and many other groups, they're becoming aware of the fact, actually, insurance has almost been a part of a problem. And we claim we're trying to help our clients, the companies we work with. Aren't there better ways instead of just this annual massive increase? And so whole groups of brokers who are thinking we can do this better, or entities like MediBid saying someone needs surgery. Maybe we could put it out to bid. They're surgeons with surplus time who have access to facilities. Maybe if we put that so-and-so in Oklahoma, City is looking for a hip replacement, we could see what well-known board-certified, surgeons in that city would be willing to do this procedure for. Or, as done by Dr. Keith Smith in Oklahoma City itself, starting a free market. I was talking about these changes that have emerged in the free market ecosystem, and extraordinarily creative things are happening now. And out of the seedbed of these Christian healthcare sharing ministries, I had the idea that what they were doing was actually proving so effective, maybe there would be a way that we could take that to a broader marketplace and not just have it available to people of faith, but have it available to everybody. And that's really where the concept of medical cost sharing came in. It's bringing us back to the basics of a personalized approach to medical care, where we choose to be affiliated and associated on a voluntary basis, not on a contractual sort of insurance basis, but on a voluntary basis with hundreds and actually thousands and tens of thousands of people all over the country who are choosing to share in each other's medical costs in a highly organized way. Now, that's just one expression of so many expressions that are emerging in the free market ecosystem. And this free market approach to healthcare is putting doctors and patients back in direct relationship with themselves. Instead of having, my employer or the government or the insurance company or whoever else it might be, maybe a private equity group that owns all the doctors who work in lots of ERs around the country. Instead of all these layers of middlemen in between us, is there a way to bring the consumer back into direct relationship with the physicians who are serving that community? And the answer is, of course, there is. And that's what this emerging free market system provides. But there's a big question here, because although there are now growing numbers of medical providers, rheumatologists, heart surgeons, anesthetists, family doctors, whatever, saying, I'd love to just serve the patient directly. I want to get back into that personalized healthcare where I knew the patient, I knew them by name. They valued me because they were paying for me directly instead of indirectly, not really knowing, who was paying what or whether prices were fair. So the growing sort of movement of physicians and other healthcare providers into this free market system is incredibly encouraging. But obviously, that doesn't answer the question of, is there a demand for what they are offering? Patients long for personalized care, but they don't know it's available. How do they find these doctors, these, nurse practitioners, whatever it might be, who would be available to serve them in this type of way? And so for myself, that's again where this vision that we started with began. I began to see that what we need is a movement of people who are educated to understand actually the quality of care, the access to care that you're looking for, and the price, which is fair and open and transparent, is there for the taking, but you have to make the choice to take it. 25 years ago, a gentleman called Harris Rosen of Hotels, Rosens, and Resorts in Orlando, Florida, he got so fed up with the fact that the prices for his employees were going up every year from the insurance company. He called in the insurance company leadership and he said, look, you're looking after all of these employees of mine, but my prices go up every year, but I can see the claims history. I'm not charged, I'm getting charged way more than is fair for my people. And they said, oh, you're part of a group. And he said, well, yeah, my group is all of my people. They said, oh, no, you're in a group with all sorts of other people, too. And everybody's costs have gone up. And he said, my costs haven't gone up. And they said, well, there's nothing we can do about that. You're a part of this group. And he said, well, I can do something. He said, I'm going to fire you. But he didn't do what most people do in that situation, fire Blue Cross so that they can go to Humana. And then, if it's not working with Humana, maybe we'll try going over to United Healthcare. No, he fired the system. And he began a movement, in a sense, of CEOs saying there are better ways that we can do this. And that's part of this grand vision that I'm trying to communicate today. We've got aspirations for the American healthcare system being open and transparent and honest, with people's motivations being well aligned, where the doctor is entirely focused on looking after the patient, because it's the patient who's paying him. And as you think about this doesn't just help medical care, it helps every ordinary person out there, because the cost of healthcare has gone up so dramatically over the last 30 or 40 years that the average American worker's income has remained in purchasing power completely stagnant, because all of that money that they used to get by way of salary increases is being gobbled up by the medical system. But there's a cure for those stagnant wages. If we put healthcare and healthcare choices back in the hands of ordinary people, of which there are now effective ways to do that we don't have time to describe today, we can cure the problem of stagnant wages. And so by curing what's gone wrong with healthcare, we can also be a huge contributing factor towards putting this country economically back into a sound approach. And so I'm just suggesting today, I don't know what your vision is, but I have a vision of a better way to pay for healthcare that leads to personalized care, which means that you have access to the providers of your choice and when you need it at a higher quality than you've ever experienced before and at a price which is significantly lower than what you're paying now. Is that a pipe dream? Well, I don't think so. We're certainly finding with the companies we work with that they can be saving 30 to 50% on the overall cost of care for their employees. And I'd love to encourage all of you to say, where can I put my vision of what happens in the healthcare in such a way that I create a better system for the next generation? I hope that all makes sense. Stacey, let me hand back to you.
Thanks, Dr. Dale. Yes, and just to echo what Dr. Dale is saying, I think we all have, we've heard, this is the third keynote thus far. We heard the NUCA system, we heard David Contorno, and now yourself kind of echoing the same theme that yes, there is in fact another way. And I know there's a number of benefit consultants that are on the wire here that I am 100% sure have seen this in action and probably are echoing the same thought. Let me ask you a couple of questions though. How much of what we're talking about here depends on a highly literate healthcare consumer, one who fully understands and appreciates, some of the things, maybe at not quite the same degree, but some of what we're talking about here?
A close friend and colleague of mine, Jamie Lagarde, who's actually a CEO of our company, Sedera, he puts a kind of answer to your question like this. He says, all Americans are imbued with a certain superpower. And that superpower is they're amazing shoppers. They know how to consume. And, if we know how to get a fair price on a car, or a fair price on a towel, or a fair price on a meal, we can probably figure out how to get a fair price on medical care if that fair price is out there. And so what I would say is, it's not that people aren't literate, it's that almost everybody, including the physicians, including the insurance brokers, including the heads of HR, assume that the only way you can get this is through an insurance system. The insurance system for healthcare has only really been around since the Second World War. It's not the only way. Now, it has, some good aspects of it, but as you look, there are all sorts of ways people can have access. And I think part of what people is hearing are that new and innovative approaches are emerging that are working really well. And I can tell you, it doesn't matter in our experience whether people are white collar or blue collar, whether English is their first language or maybe not their language at all, whether they have a lot of education or a little education. When they begin to understand that this will impact their bottom line, they figure it out. And so I have a lot of hope in the human condition. I believe ordinary people can understand what's going on here.
Yeah, and before I launch into my question here, the one thing that I would say, I did interview Marshall Allen, who many of you are familiar with. He wrote the book, Never Pay the First Bill. I interviewed him on the podcast the other day. And one of the things that he said that struck me was that even if there's how many, 150 million people in this country that have commercial insurance, if only 1% of them would ask for an itemized bill when they go to the hospital or just do kind of minor things, then that's a message that gets sent to the existing infrastructure that, if only 1% of the people ask for an itemized bill, then maybe the billing department, who has no structures in place to provide itemized bills, which are essential for any sort of transparency, maybe they'll get their act together and, in a way that's a little bit more consumer driven. This all being said, One of the reasons why healthcare is different than buying a car, for example, is that there's inelastic demand. And what I mean by that is that while, people can choose not to buy a car if they can't afford it, um, it's hard to not get a operation that is necessary. Many elective procedures aren't super elective. And then you also have the asymmetry of knowledge problem. In other words, if a doctor, people really trust their physician. So if a physician says you need this and the best place to go, most people drive by 3 less expensive MRI machines on their way to the one that the doctor recommended, right? Like that's out there. So how do you counter inelastic demand, asymmetrical knowledge? What are your thoughts there?
Okay, Stacey, you're raising a really important series of questions. And obviously there's no magic pill to take where everybody suddenly understands, but it's really that you have to begin to understand that almost everybody in the system does not understand themselves how the system works. So you say the doctor sends you somewhere and you pass 3 places that were cheaper. Why? Because it didn't occur to the doctor that it mattered to you. It didn't occur to the doctor that there might be this huge price differential, because the presumption of the doctor is that you have insurance, and the presumption of the patient is someone else is going to pay. Whether the someone else is the employer or the government or whoever. Well, none of us have skin in the game. And none of us have bothered to educate ourselves. We perpetuate the problems that are there. Once we begin to take some personal responsibility, and whether that's just for me as a person in my family, or whether it's me as, a CEO or chairman of a board, and saying how we're going to see our healthcare dollars allocated, when we begin to take responsibility, then we begin to see there are answers out there actually quite easy to find. But yeah, while we continue to say, oh, well, I've got this magic card in my wallet and it just takes care of everything. No, it doesn't. It doesn't take care of anything. That's done between people. And so the system has been corrupted, even though most of the people within the system don't understand and don't realize that they have a responsibility to be educated and to educate others.
It's interesting what you've done with Sedera, which is, as you mentioned, it's medical sharing. So, everybody pays into a pot, and then the dollars are allocated to those who need them. I.e., everybody's got to care about others, which someone just put into the chat, which is amazingly on point. But so obviously, if you're not going to bankrupt the shared bucket there of cash, at Sedera, what are you doing in order to ensure that people are thinking about each other and not doing things which are ill-advised if we're concerned about getting fair prices?
That's a huge question to try and answer in about a minute and a half that we have.
Yes, sorry.
Let's just say that we find people are people of goodwill who understand that they not only need personal responsibility, but if they choose to be a part of a community, then they need to understand they also have responsibility to the community. Of course, we try and make that as simple as possible. We have all sorts of tools to educate them. We make it real simple. One of the primary tools we use with the vast majority of people is encouraging them to belong to a DPC, a direct primary care or virtual primary care practice, because when you've got a doctor helping navigate the system for you, you already trust him. And if he understands the cash pay system, that on its own makes a huge difference. So no simple answer to your question, but remarkably effective answers, even with people as little educated as they are now about what's gone wrong with the system.
That makes a lot of sense. And I could see that as a patient, it's a better way to do it, to have a physician you can trust who's going to steer you properly, as opposed to the current one in which if you need to get referred to a specialist, you're sort of on your own to figure out who the right one is.
What you're saying is so true. And, a physician you really trust and who cares about your financial condition as well as your physical condition is an incredible ally. And just one tiny little thing to say, you talked about everybody putting their money into a pot. It's kind of important from our perspective that people understand that's not actually what happens, because that would kind of make us insurance, and we're not insurance. We have a wonderful way, technology enabled, of helping people literally share directly with the other people who need the money. So the money is never in a pot. It's in everybody's separate individual accounts.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. I obviously know just enough to be terribly dangerous. So I just want to thank Dr. Dale for your time today. I think that was really informative. So kind of wrapping up where we've been today, it's been a journey the past 2 days. So, I think the main theme as we're wrapping up here is that there is something better here. There's another direction. We don't need to settle for expensive, dysfunctional healthcare that we've kind of come to expect. We shouldn't, we're better than that, right? As a country, we can serve patients better and we deserve better, right? So today we've heard about the NUCA system of care, which has created aspirational healthcare as opposed to the deficiency healthcare, as Darrell Moon, our sponsor, calls it. And that can certainly be a model for all of us down here in the lower 48. We also heard from David Contorno this afternoon and had some stellar advice from Dr. Dale just now from Sedera. And, the good news for anyone embarking on a journey to offering better healthcare benefits at a fair price that actually leads to, better health for employees is that, as many have said and repeated, there is a roadmap here. If the right advisor is involved or the advisor's advisors, there's a lot of help out there that can, in order to create the alignment between the system and, the employees. So, you can go fast or you can go gradually and create stepping stones. There's a bunch of different ways. Not one size obviously fits all, but there's help out there. So I think I feel very inspired and, as in an aspirational kind of way. So, today definitely want to express special thanks to the South Central Foundation and their NUCA system of care, first for creating such an amazing healthcare system that can be an example to all the other healthcare systems to follow. Secondly, thanking everyone at South Central who's been so supportive in helping the conference organizers, put this whole thing together. Extra special thanks to Tanya Oden, who with the South Central Foundation Learning Institute, who put in an amazing effort on this conference. Also, super thanks to Darrell Moon and the gang over at Orion, who did a yeoman's job pulling this whole thing together. And then there was a number of also people on the committee who were super helpful in getting this whole thing organized over the past 6 months. So let me just make sure that our sponsors are recognized again, who provided all the financial contributions here. Platinum, Dr. Tony Dale, thank you. Sedera, which is medical cost sharing program. We have Your Heart Test, which is state-of-the-art technology. Our gold sponsors, HCRM, Resilience Pro, Health Benefits Lab. We also have Silver, Smith Communication Partners, Bloomquist Hale, and Orion. And then Bronze, Medisync, NFP, Redirect Health, Patient Pal, Going on Offense, Integrated Musculoskeletal Care, Spengler Associates, and yours truly from Relentless Health Value podcast. All this stuff, by the way, is on the website. So you can go check anybody out that you want to go check out. There's all the content information and et cetera. So right now, actually not right now, in doing math quick in my head, about 9 minutes, the last breakout sessions are going to be held. So those are the open discussions, and they're sort of divided up by who you are. Like there's an employer one, et cetera. You can look in the schedule there and find the one that's most appropriate. So definitely head over there in 9 minutes. And again, thank you all very, very much for coming today. It's been such a pleasure.